Okay. Maybe back to class, right? So before we start class again, apart from these modules, if you want to know anything of the legal professions, right? If you are thinking about joining legal professions, or especially if that is your second career, or anything, you can talk to me, all right? Better after the class. Because during the break, I really want to have the break, right? So I prefer you talk to me after the class. So normally I end the class around 9:45. Right? Normally it depends, right? Sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. Probably around 9:45. So if you have questions, you can talk to me, right? So if you are local, of course, you can speak to me in Cantonese, right? So after the class, right? Because being a lawyer, so actually to me, it's my second career. It's my second career. So I graduated from the law school. My first degree is is an LB degree, but this is actually my second career. Right? I work as a company secretary and compliance officer before my admission as a barrister. All right, so anything you want to know about the legal profession, you can talk to me. All right, so we're back to class. So before the break, right? Before the break, so I told you that we have to learn about the appointment of an agent. So because there's no special requirement in the law in saying that if you want to appoint an agent, you have to do something like this, right? No, we don't have such a requirement. And we don't have any requirement saying that you have to sign a piece of paper in order to appoint an agent. Right? You don't have to fill in a form. You don't have to do any registrations in any government department. You don't have to, right? So it means that there are many different ways to appoint an agent. And the first one, express appointment. It means you clearly state that with all the conditions. So this person is my agent, right? Is going to do something on behalf of me. So that's express appointment, and that's what we learned before the break. So how about the second one? All right, we also have the implied appointment. So why we have implied appointment? Because you have to compare with the first one, right? What we mean by express appointment means you expressly saying that, right? It can be oral, it can be written, but anyway, which is expressly stated. This person being appointed as my agent to do something like this, right? But sometimes you can appoint an agent without saying anything at all, or without writing anything down. You don't need to write anything in a piece of paper. You don't need to say anything. But sometimes when you are doing something, and it implies that you appointed someone as your agent. So we look at a case here. The chairman of this company can always sign a contract on behalf of the company. And all the contracts signed by the chairman and always being approved by the company. Even without any prior approval, right? So by doing this, when you are always allowing someone to do something on behalf of another person, right? You let it happen, always. Of course, not one single time. Normally, a long period of time, right? A few years, or more than a few years. And then the court held that his appointment as an agent was implied from the circumstances, right? So someone always being allowed to do something, and the law assumed that that person is an agent of another person, right? For example, if someone always handling the admissions in home use space, right? You don't know whether that person actually being appointed by home use space, but in the last few years, right, or in the last 10 years, all the admissions being handled by, say, Thomas Ng, right, in this course management, then you can assume that that person is an agent of home use space, and that person being appointed by home use space as an agent in handling admission, right? And that's what we call implied appointment. You never heard of the principle You never learn of the formalities regarding the appointment of this person, right? You don't know. But this person always doing something on behalf of the principal. And it always works, right? Never have any problem at all. So you can assume that person is an agent, right? And that's what we call implied employment, right? So it's the second way of employing an agent. Employment by necessity. Well, this is a very interesting concept in common law, right? So very interesting. So I really like it, right? It shows the flexibility of the common law system. So even someone may not like it. Employment by necessity. So what it means? An agent may be appointed without any express or implied authorizations. So I suppose you understand what I mean by express authorization. Because that will be very straightforward, right? I appoint, this gentleman to do something on behalf of me. That will be express authorization. So I think that you also understand what I mean by implied, right? Because when you're always allowing someone to do something, and you're always okay with it, you're always fine with it, right? You always allow that to happen, and it happens for a long time. That person will be, appointed to have an implied appointment. But sometimes you never expressly mentions any authorizations, and you are not allowing anyone to do anything on behalf of you, but just something happened, right? Just something happened. In certain situations that the court held that an agency must be created, it means that it's a relationship being imposed by the court, by the judge, right? Not between the principal and the agents, but the court, right? The court impose such a relationship, right? And you have no choice, right? And you have no choice. You have to comply with it. So I show you a case here, a very interesting case. So a horse was brought to a railway station, but no one paid on, right? So a horse, a poor animal, being left in a railway station. So no one take care of this poor animal, right? And the rail company had no choice but to take care of the horse, out of humanity. So, but the company later on, they found the owner, right? They found the owner. Of course, they asked for the reimbursement, right? You have to, pay back all the expenses. Right? I spend money in taking care of your horse, the food, all the medical expenses, right? Everything. But the owner refused to reimburse the rail company and argued that he never authorized them to handle his horse, right? So come on, who are you, right? But I never appoint this company, right? I never appoint any person to do anything on behalf of me. So you are doing it voluntarily, right? It's only, I don't know, right? All of your kind heart, you are doing charity or what? But you never have my authorization. So I never authorize you to do anything. So you don't have any right to claim anything from me because I don't have any relationship with you at all, right? But the court held that the rail company was appointed as an agent of the owner to handle the horse out of necessity. And the company also entitled to the reimbursement. But it means the law imposed an agency relationship. Right? The court held that. So here I appoint the company as agent of the owner, and then to buy the food and to ask for all the medical, assistance, right, from the vet, from anyone. This relationship being imposed by the court because the court thought that, it was fair, right, and that's the only way to be fair. So the principal never appoint the agent here, right, in this story. The owner of the horse never appoint the rail company. But the relationship being imposed by the court, and you have to comply with it. Right? And that we call it appointment by necessity. Right? So I mean a very interesting concept in common law, right? So it's very flexible, the common law system. Even you don't have an agency, but the court create an agency in order to, make everything right in the story here, right? So that's employment by necessity. Last one, ratification. Right, ratifications. What I mean by ratifications? So I'm sorry, you have to be the victim again, right? Okay. I never appoint this gentleman to be my agent. Never, right? Never. But you heard about it, right? You once heard about it when I'm, chatting with this lady. I want to sell my watch, right? But I never appoint you, never, right? Never appoint you to be my agent. Because I checked with the lady. Well, I'm going to sell my watch maybe around $5,000, right? So that will be good because I really need cash, right? I really need cash. So you heard about it. With all my authorizations, you concluded a contract with the lady here to sell my watch with $1 million. Right? 1 million. I don't know why you can do something like this, right? But I never appoint you. Then but anyway, you conclude a contract with this lady. Right? You sell my watch for $1 million. And then after you conclude a contract with this lady, and you ask for my permissions, you ask my approval of this contract, then you sign on behalf of me with all my authorization with this lady here, right? Do you think that I will be happy to give you the approval? Of course, right? That's $1 million. I'm supposed to sell my watch for $5,000. So now you help me to sell my watch for $1 million, right? But I never appoint you, of course, right? So it means you conclude a contract with all my authorization, but you conclude a contract with lucky. Right? So do you think I have the right to approve your contract? The answer is yes. Right? Yes. So you can appoint an agent subsequently after the contract being concluded. Right? Because normally that's not the case. So think about it. Normally you have to appoint someone first before that person can act on behalf of you. Well, that's the logic, right? Someone must be appointed first before he can represent another person, right? This, simple logic. But again, I'm telling you that the common law system is very flexible, right? It's very flexible. So if someone without authorization, but anyway, conclude a contract on behalf of me, right? On behalf of the principal, and I really like it. I don't mind, right? I really like it. So I can still approve this contract. And the way to approve is what we call ratification, right? Ratifications. 追認, right? 追認, I call it in Chinese. So if a person purported to act on behalf of someone without authorization was later on being ratified, right? Confirmed, then agency may still be created. That's possible, right? Possible. But subject to some conditions here. You have to fulfill some conditions if you want to ratify a contract, right? If you want ratifications. Number one, it must be within a reasonable time. If you conclude contract without my approval, then you have to seek for my approval within a reasonable time, say ASAP. I can't give you exactly how long, right? But normally you have to do it ASAP, as soon as possible, within a few days. It depends on the kind of nature of the transaction, right? It depends on the nature of the transaction. If it involves a great sum of money, then normally that will be a longer period. But if there's only something a few $100, $1,000 or $2,000, then you have to do it in, say, a few hours, right? Or you have to let me know immediately, right? But anyway, you have to do it. You have to seek for approval within a reasonable time. Right? It doesn't make sense if you ask for my approval 3 years later. It must be whole or half, but not partial. So it means that if I want to ratify your contract, so I have to take it 100% or not, but not to pick up the part. I only pick up the part. Right? You get the point here. For example, right, with all my authorizations, you concluded a contract with this lady inside my watch, right, with $1 million. Plus, I have to also give my signed copy to this lady. 加一個簽名版本嘅書，right? I don't like that, right? I won't do it, right? I cannot just pick up the part I like and then to deny the other part I don't really like, right? So if I want to rectify your contract, I have to take it 100% or to deny it at all, right? But not just the part I like to have, right? Not 70%, not even 99%, but 100% or zero, right? The principal name have been mentioned. It means that, right, even without my authorizations, I never authorize you to act on behalf of me. But when, at the time when you negotiate with this lady, you have to mention my name to her, right? You get the point here, right? Without my authorization. But during your negotiations, right, I didn't know it, but you have to mention my name. It means that you told this lady you are acting on behalf of him, right? My name must be, learned by the third party. Must be. The contract ratified cannot be void. Because it means that even for ratifications, we still abide by the basic principle in contract law, right? But you're going to learn about it later. Because there are a lot of principles regarding the contract, right? How to form a valid contract, validity of a contract. If you want to ratify a contract, you cannot act against the basic principle in contract law. So it means that if the contract itself is not valid, then I cannot ratify. For example, right, illegal contract, right? Illegal contract. A contract in selling drugs, a contract in selling weapons, right? Selling guns, right? Selling cocaine, right? So that's one example. But there can be many examples of an invalid contract. But illegal contract is one of them, right? So if you concluded an illegal contract with this lady, right, then I cannot approve it. Because my ratification cannot against the general principle in contract law, right? And the principle must have full picture of the dealing. You have to disclose everything to the principal. If you ask for my ratifications, if there are something hidden. If there are hidden terms, if something you try to cover off on me, that kind of ratification is not valid, right? So once again, remember, you can always ratify a contract. It means that you authorize your agent subsequently after the contract. Right, you can do so, but subject to the condition here, right? So you have to fulfill all the conditions. Okay, so we just learned about the different ways to appoint an agent, right? The different ways to appoint an agent. So that's all about appointment. It means that whether we appoint an agent, whether we have an agent here, appointment, right? Appointment. But we have to know more than that. Because we also need to learn about the different types of authority, right? Different types of authority. Because even an agent being appointed, they may have different authority. That will be very important. Why? The authority of an agent will be very important. So think about it, right? Think about it. Why is it so important? The authority. The scope of authorization. Why is it so important? Third party and principal. So why authorization or why authority of an agent is something so important? Think about it from the perspective of the third party, right? If you are the third party, do you think that you have to conserve the authority of the agent dealing with you? Is this something important to you? If this lady telling me that she's representing Legacy to sign a contract with me, or for whatever sum of money involved, right? Do you think that what being mentioned by her of her authorization is something important to me? Is it important? Why is it important? If she lied to me, right? Well, maybe Mr. Lee really appointed you as his agent, right? But you can only conclude a contract for not more than $3 million, right? But now you are trying to conclude a contract with me for $3 billion, So her authorization will be very important, right? Because when she's doing something beyond her authorizations, then probably the contract you sign on behalf of Mr. Lee with me will not be will not be valid, right? So for the third party, the authorization of an agent will be something important. Then how about the principal? How about the principal? If you are the principal, do you think that the authority of your agent will also be something important? Yes, but why? Regard liability for the third party. So I'm asking you to think from the perspective of the principal, right? We just discussed the importance of authorization regarding a third party, right? Because when an agent signs a contract beyond the authority of the third party, that contract probably is not valid, right? Then you try to think about from the perspective of the principal. So why authorization to the agent is something important? Very simple. I authorize this lady to negotiate a contract on behalf of me for not more than $3 million, right? So now you sign a contract with this gentleman for $1 billion. What can I do? What can I do? What happened in law? Do you remember that at the very beginning, what I mean by agency relationships? 3 parties and 2 contracts, right? What's the first contract? The first contract between the principal and the agent, right? So if I authorize this lady to conclude a contract with a third party for not more than $3 million, but you conclude a contract $5 billion, so what I can do? To sue her for breach of contract, right? So as simple as that, right? So authorization is something really important, no matter from the perspective of the principal or the third party. As a third party, you concern about the validity, right? Whether the contract being signed between you and the agent is something, binding, legal, right? From the principal, if your agent doing something beyond authorization, then you have the right to stop it, right? And maybe to sue your agent for breach of contract, right? So authorization is something important, right? So we have to understand. So what kind of authority an agent is having? Number 1, right? The first kind of authority, express authority. Just like express employment, something similar, right? Very similar. There are many cases. What I mean. What I mean by express authority. Express means clear, explicit. So usually the authority being granted to an agent based on the terms of written or oral agreement between the agent and the principal. It means that, right, the authorization clearly stated in a piece of paper, or that can be by oral, right? That can be verbal. But anyway, expressly stated. Just like the example I used it with this lady. I appoint this lady, right? Maybe verbal, right? Maybe verbal, to conclude contract for buy and sell not more than $3 million within the coming 3 months, right? So that's express authority. It means everything expressly stated. So that would be very clear, right? And that would be even better if you make it in a written form, right? Black and white. But again, right? Again, express authority doesn't mean that it must be written, right? I'm not saying that it must be written. That would be preferable to be written, but not necessary. The point is you have to make it clear exactly what you want, right? What you want. What you want to authorize this lady to act on behalf of you. So that will be simple. That will be very clear. So in case of problem, right? In case of problem, if the third party want to know about your authorizations, if we have a contract here, right? If we have a piece of paper, if the third party concerned about your authorization, then you can just simply show that paper to the third party, then everything will be clear, right? So that's why I'm saying that a written form will be preferable. That will be very good, right? That will be very good. Your express authorization, not in written form, right, but verbal. And what you can do, if the third party query about your authorizations, then probably you can ask me to make a phone call to the third party, or you can ask the third party to make a phone call to the principal to confirm your authorization, right? That can also be achievable, but still preferable, that will be in a written form, right? That will be in a written form. So normally in the commercial world, the agents being appointed with express authority, right? So your authority will be stated in a piece of paper, and that will be good for all the parties involved, right? But that will be very key. So if anyone with questions regarding your authorization, you just show that piece of paper. Right? In case I have dispute with you, then we can resolve through that piece of paper, whether you are acting beyond your authorization or not, right? So that will be very good. Express authority, right? Number one. Again, very similar to the way of appointment. So in appointment, we have express appointment, right? So regarding authorization, we have express authorizations. Regarding appointment, we have implied appointment. And for authority and for authorization, we also have implied authorizations, which is by comparison to express authority, right? By comparing with express authorization. So what is it, right? What I mean by implied authority? So that's not exactly the same of express appointment, right? For implied appointment. But sometimes, right? Sometimes you have to remember that. Well, actually, it's related to express authorizations. So even I appoint this lady, right? If I appoint this lady, in a written form, right? With a written agreement, right? So I write down everything, black and white. But remember that, right? Remember that. It is not possible to write down everything. You think about it, right? It's not possible to write down everything. Well, especially in a very complex, sophisticated business transactions, right? Because there can be many thousand, hundred, billion of possibilities, right? So if I try to appoint someone with a piece of paper, I want to make it clear, but that's not possible to write down everything. It's not possible to write down every single authorization because I cannot know, right? So what will happen during the negotiation process? So it means that, right, sometime in law, we can assume that apart from the express authorizations, you have implied authority to do something reasonably incidental and necessary in order to carry out your duty. It means sometimes, right, sometimes, even without express authorizations, but because you are doing something, say like to sell my watch on behalf of me, right, you must have some authority. You must have, even not being stated in the authorizations, right? For example, right, I authorize you to sell my watch on behalf of me for, usually when you're selling something, you only set the bottom price, right? You won't set the ceiling because you don't care, right? More expensive will be better to you. So you only set the bottom price, right, normally. So the bottom price will be $5,000, right? So that is somehow my authorizations. But sometimes when a buyer negotiating a contract with you, that person may try to say like, ask for installment, right? You will pay by installment. Not a one-off payment, right? I pay to you in the coming 12 months, 6 months, or to have an interest or not to have an interest, right? Something like that. So there can be many different, possibilities. And not possible for the principal to authorize the agents for every single topic, right? That's not possible. So sometimes, for example, when you are being authorized to be my agents in to sell my watch, then the law assumes that, right, you also have the right to deal with any problem related to interest rate, related to interest payment, or related to whether the payment being settled by installment, right? Do you get my point here? Because that's not possible to authorize everything. So something will be assumed. You can do it. You have the right to do it. I'll give you one example here. Okay. We look at a case. So the owner of a bar, right? Bar and restaurant. They're selling beer, right? Selling the wine. The owner of a bar appointed an agent to act on behalf of him to purchase some, needed goods or materials. The principal did not authorize the agent to buy any cigarettes, right? Not any cigarette, not any cigarettes. But nevertheless, the agent bought a few boxes, and he thought that it was normally needed by the customers, right? So that agent, not being especially authorized by the bar, right? By the bar in the restaurant, in buying the cigarettes, right? Never being especially appointed. But he assumed that, right? He assumed that when you ask me to buy the food, to buy the wines, right? To buy all the needed materials for the bar, then normally I should also have the right to buy the cigarettes. If I think that would be good, right? Maybe if I buy the wine, the beer, and the cigarette together, I enjoy, a very handsome discount. Right? So the agent tried to argue that even without my authorizations, my authority being entitled, right? Being entitled. And how do you think? The court held that the principal was liable to pay for the cigarettes on the reason that the agent had acted within his mutual authority, normally given to the agent of discount. That said, the agent has authority to buy a cigarette even without express authorizations, right? The court agreed with the arguments of the agent. The argument court ruled in favor of the agent. Yes, right? You have the right to do it. But normally, as an agent of the bar, you also have the right to buy the cigarettes, right? But exactly, right? Exactly. What will be the entitled authorization? That depends. Right? That depends on your professions. It depends on your industry. Right? I don't know, right? I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what will be entitled authorizations. It always depends on the nature of your business, right? But that is possible, right? You get my point here. But that is possible, right? So that's the second kind of authorizations. Number 3, apparent authority. Right? Apparent authority. What do you mean by apparent authority? It means that, right? It means that an agent may be assumed to be authorized to do something that a third party believed to be by considering the circumstances. Something just like the appointment. When something always happens, right? Something always happens. And then the third party also relying on it. Then the third party can assume that you are being authorized to do so. I'll give you one example here. If the boss always allows his secretary to agree on the terms of his fixed deposit with the bank, right? The boss is very wealthy, right? He got a lot of cash. So he always needs to negotiate with the bank for the interest rate with a fixed deposit. So the secretary is the one to negotiate on behalf of the boss, right? So she has been doing, the same thing for 5 years, right? 10 years. And that's always fine, right? Always fine. Always being approved by the boss. So the bank will assume the secretary as such an authority, right? And that's what we call apparent authority. Because apparently, right, by my observations, that always happens, right? Always happens, without any problem at all. So the boss, right, the principal will be bound by the terms made by the secretary. So if you always allow that, right, you always allow that to happen. It happens for more than 10 years. Then you cannot suddenly, I mean the boss, right? You cannot suddenly try to revoke the terms agreed by your secretary to the bank, right? Because the bank can rely on apparent authority. I assume that your secretary being authorized to do so, right? To negotiate on behalf of your interest rate. Because it always happens, right? It happens in the last 10 years. You never complain of it, right? And you cannot suddenly complain after 15 years, all right? So that's what we call apparent authority. It means apparently, by the observation of the third party, someone being authorized to do something, right? Apparent authority. Then how about the duties of an agent? How about duties of an agent? I mean, of course, duties from an operational sense, it depends on your organization, right? And it depends on the nature of your business. Maybe you help me to sell something, you help me to buy something, right? You help me to negotiate for a settlement, you help me to negotiate with IRD or my opponents, right, in the court, right? From an operational sense, that depends on the nature of your business. But the law assumes some duties for all the agents. So it means that if you are an agent, then you will be bound by the law, to follow something, right? So number one, you have to follow the principal instructions, of course. Right. Number one, you have to follow the principal instructions. Customer service, to avoid conflict of interest. You have to keep a separate account to the principal, no secret commissions, and you have to exercise due care and skills. So let's take a look at it one by one. The first one, you always need to follow the instructions. Well, that's a very strict and very burdensome requirement, right? So you may argue that even I'm not an agent, I'm just an employee of the company, I still need to take instruction from my supervisor, right? I still need to take instruction from my boss, from my supervisor, from the head of the department. But the nature is different from a principal and agent, right? Not the same. If you are an employee, right? If you are being hired by the company, if you are in the company, if you are not following the instruction of your boss, right? If you are not taking instruction from your supervisor, unless which is something so serious, right? Normally, that will not be a problem of a contractual dispute, right? Normally, you will not be sued for breach of employment contract. Normally, right? Normally. If something very serious happens, there will be another case. But normally say like, you are not doing something very well, you are not, following the orders from your boss, right? You are not, reporting your duties on time, something like this. I don't think that your boss can sue you for breach of contract. But he has the right to fire you, right? You will be terminated. But that will not be a termination of contract. I mean, that will not be a breach of contract. Because the burden being imposed on an employee is not that burdensome at all. As an employee, you take instruction from your supervisor, and you exercise your own discretion in doing something, provided that is reasonable, right? Because that is not possible, in a company, to have a contract to stipulate all your duties in big details. You only have a very rough guidelines, right? You know that most of you are employee, I guess, right? So you check your employment manual, you have the employment contract. So they roughly state the principle here. You still have a lot of discretions. Because you are doing a lot of things, right? You're doing a lot of things in the company as a general manager, as an HR manager, right? As an IT manager, you do a lot of things. But you think about the relationship between principal and agents. So normally an agent being authorized to do something specific. Is it correct? Right? I authorize this lady to sell something on behalf of me, to buy something on behalf of me, to negotiate a settlement with the IRD, with other parties in the court. So normally that will be something very specific. One thing which is very specific. So the burdensome will be very burdensome, right? You have a very heavy shoulder. You have to do it exactly as I told you. You have to do it exactly as I authorized you to do. So that's not the same thing as an employee. So think about it. Use your common sense, right? So the first duty as an agent, you have to follow the instructions of the principal. Exactly, right? Full and exact, right? Full and exact. fully and exactly. Number one. Number two, personal service. Personal service. What mean of personal service? Remember the definition of agency. Any of you still remember the definition of agency? Three parties and two contracts, right? Three parties and two contracts. When a person authorizes another person to act on behalf of him, that agency being created. So everything being so personal because you are acting on behalf of me, right? So now you are having my capacity. So if I authorize this lady to negotiate a contract with him in selling my watch, right, for with a bottom price of $5,000, and you have the right to deal with anything else. So you are actually in law, right? At that particular moment, you are able. Remember that, right? Because the contract signed by the agents with the third party is not a contract between the agent and the third party, but a contract between the third party and the principal. So you're able, right? It means at that time, legally speaking, of course, right? Legally speaking. So the service must be personal. It means that you cannot delegate your work to someone else. Well, of course, unless with my authorization, right? Of course, right? With my authorization, with my permission, you can do anything, of course. But without my approval, right? Without my permissions, then you have to do everything personally, right? I'll give you a case here, very interesting. Right, very interesting case. So an estate agent can be given a task in selling a house on behalf of his principal, right? That's normal for an estate agent, right? It's very normal. Selling a house or selling a piece of land, selling an apartment. But something interesting happened here. The agent delegated his work to another agent. Of course, without authorization, right? With authorization, that will be fine. Right? That is not a problem at all. Without authorizations, and still want to claim for the commissions. Right? That person, that self-agent, still want to claim for the commissions. His rationale is that he did work properly, and most important is some agent successfully sold the house with a good price, right? I only authorized the lady in selling my house, right? And you delegate the work to this gentleman, right? But I never authorized you to delegate your work. But you try to claim you try to claim for the commissions. Even you breach the contract, right? You already breached the contract because I only asked you to do the work, right? You delegate your work to someone else without my permissions. So I don't want to pay you commission. I want to sue you. But you argue that, oh, come on, right? Come on. I did my work properly, right? You asked me to sell your house, right? So I sold your house, and also with a good price, right? You don't have any losses at all. So why you sue on it? You don't have any right to sue on it. But the court disagreed, right? It's allowed to claim and how that the agent could not delegate his work to some agents without prior approval from his principal. Because the court ruled that the service must be personal, right? And you cannot delegate your work to anyone. And you cannot justify your delegations by good price, by good work, by everything being done properly, right? No, it's not enough, right? You cannot justify your wrong. You cannot justify your delegations with anything else, because you have to think about the true nature of agents. When you appoint someone, that person acting on behalf of you, right? So you are the only person to act on behalf of me, but not the others, right? Because that is the very requirement of agency. All right? So that's the second one. So number 3, to avoid conflict of interest. An agent owns fiduciary duty to his principal. You are going to learn about fiduciary duty in great details in lecture 7, right? And that will be related to director. It's a very important concept in common law. Fiduciary duty means something like good faith, right? Something like good faith and honesty, right? Which is a very burdensome requirement. right? I can tell you fiduciary duties. And that's a very important concept related to directors. Right? So we're going to learn about it later. So as an agent, you own a fiduciary duty to the principal, and you must always avoid conflict of interest. What do I mean by conflict of interest? What do I mean by conflict of interest? Well, that's a very important concept for the professionals, right? For the lawyers, for the accountants. They always need to be aware of the conflict of interest, right? It's number one in our professional conduct. No matter you are solicitor or barrister, you always have to avoid conflict of interest. Okay, so let's take a look at the case first, right? Before I explain to you what I mean by conflict of interest. You may have some ideas, right? Because you can just apply your common sense. So what happened here, the principal retained an agent to acquire certain shares on behalf of him, right? So this principal want to buy some shares of another company, right? Want to buy shares from a company. And he appointed an agent to help him, to do all the work. The agent pretending that the shares have been bought from a third party, but in fact, right, the agent sold his own shares to the principal, right? So the shares actually belong to himself, but not to a third party, right? But not to a third party. The court held that the agent breaches fiduciary duty and the sales of shares could be cancelled. Why? Do you know the argument of this agent? The agent argued that, oh, yes, fine, right? I lied to you, sorry. I lied to you. So actually the shares belong to me, but not from a third party. But it's a very good price. It's a good price. Right? Well, we can have a fair value. For example, if you have a CPA, right? You can retain a CPA to do assessment, to understand the fair value of that share. And the price is not bad, right? The price is not bad. So I don't think you have the right to sue me. Come on, you are not making any losses at all, right? You are not suffering for anything, right? You're not suffering at all. It's a good price. It's a fair price. So no matter you bought the shares from me or the third party, there's no difference. Because you are only buying the shares to the market price, and that's a fair price, right? So that's the argument from the agents. But the court denied that, right? The court rejected that kind of argument because the court, right, focus on conflict of interest. So that's another thing you have to learn regarding the approach of the judge. So normally the judge or the court, right, they don't like to assess the value on anything. Normally they don't want to do it. Why? Because they don't know. Right? They don't know. I mean, nowadays some people are criticizing the judiciary, but as far as I understand, without any politics, most of them are very good. Right? Most of them are very good. As far as I understand, most of them are very good because the public, they just don't understand the judgment. Right? So I'm not talking about politics, but the judicial behavior in general. So most of them are very good, but just people don't understand. But anyway, I mean the point is that the judge, they are very reluctant to assess the value or to give a number, right? They will be very reluctant. So if you try to ask the court to make a decision whether the share price of this company should be $5 per share or $10 per share, the court will be very reluctant to do so because they don't. They are judges, they are lawyers, right? They only have legal knowledge. They are not accountants. And there are many different professions, right? There are many different industries. So how can you ask the court to make to give you a number, right? So normally that will not be achievable. So the court only focus on legal point. And then think about conflict of interest. And then think about buy and sell, right? Think about buy and sell. As a buyer, what do you want? You want to buy as low as you can. And as a seller, what do you want? You want to sell as high as you can, right? And there's no way for reconciliations. It must have conflict, right? So if the principal retain agents to authorize someone to act on behalf of him to buy something, right? and then you are also the one in selling the shares to me, then you are having inherent conflict. 結構上嘅衝突 right? So it means that you cannot avoid, or you are not possible to have a fair price or to have a fair assessment. Because if you think about an agent, you are working as a seller and a buyer at the same time, and you will have conflict, and you cannot resolve this kind of conflict. So the only way is to avoid conflict of interest, right? It means that even finally turn out the price will be the same, but still, you should not be the seller, right? When you are looking as a buyer, then you buy only, right? Because the court, they never consider the real price. They never consider the real number, but they consider about your legal positions. So when you are having conflict, then you are having conflict, right? That cannot be justified by a good price, all right? So that is conflict of interest. I think there's a typo error here, right? It should be separate account, right? Yeah, separate account, right? It's a typo error, sorry. Separate account to the principal. Right. I think this one is common sense. I don't have to explain in detail. It means that when you are working as an agent on behalf of someone, you have to keep, a separate accounting record, right? So you don't mix up your own asset, you don't mix up your own money with your principal, right? That's only common sense stuff. Last one, no secret profit. Well, that's not the same thing as conflict of interest. Similar, but not the same thing, right? Not the same thing. What I mean by a secret profit? Well, it always happens, right? It always happens. In Hong Kong or anywhere. So that's one of the main type of commercial crime. A director of a company accepts the commission from other companies for procuring his own company to place order from them, right? You know that. I'm the one in charge of the merchandising department, right? It means I have the right to make my company to buy something from the others or from the other company, right? So why I'm placing my order from this lady or from her company? Because I have commission from it, right? She told me that if you place an order to my company, you have 5% rebate, or you have 10% rebate, right? So that will be what we call a secret profit, right? And that's not allowed, of course, right? As an agent, because you have to disclose everything, right? You have to disclose everything. Well, that may be possible if your principal allows it, right? If your principal allows it. Do you know the case? Do any of you remember the case of Chen Jiwan, the what's his title? General Manager of TUD, right? So he was charged with bribery, right? Corruptions. He involved the case something like this, right? Because he received the commissions from other companies, right? In procuring TUB, to do something, I don't exactly remember what you said, right? I don't remember exactly what you said. You said something like the show in a shopping mall or what, right? But anyway, right? It doesn't matter. When you're being authorized to do something, when you make a profit, right, or advantage, or even advantage, so you have to disclose everything to your principal. Your principal allow that will be fine, right? That will be fine. So disclosure is the key here, right? So even for Donald Trump, Donald Trump being convicted for corruption, right? Because he something being hidden when he made a decision in the executive council to grant the license to some company, right? I don't remember exactly, right? Something being hidden because he rented an apartment from that company with a very discounted rent, right? Something like this. Without disclosure, right? The point is without disclosure to the executive council. If you disclose everything, and the other person, they are fine with it, or your principal being fine with it, you will be okay, right? You'll be okay. But you cover up, right? If you cover up, then you will have problem, right? But that is a secret profit. And as an agent, you cannot make secret profit. The last one, to exercise due care and skill. You know the term due diligence? Due diligence. Any of you with a finance background, M&A, due diligence. Sometimes we call it DD, right? Anyone know due diligence? You don't know. Or in Chinese, in mainland China, they call 盡職審查. 盡職審查. So it means that when you are doing something, you need to exercise a proper level of care of your diligence. Right? Diligence is your effort, something like that, something like your effort. As an agent, so you have to do it with a reasonable effort. So that is not a requirement for excellent performance, right? For example, I authorize this lady as my agent in selling my watch. Of course, what I expect as high as this can, right? The highest price, that will be better, right? The higher the better, of course, right? Of course. So if you are doing your job on behalf of me, you try to sell my watch, right? I authorize you as my agent to sell my watch. You know that even without my authorization, even without my express authorization, you know that as a seller, I always look for a high price, right? Just common sense, you know that. Then you approach this gentleman, and he offered $5,000, and then you agreed, and then concluded a contract on behalf of me. Do you think that you exercise due diligence here? Probably no. So why you ask for 1%? Right? At least you have to contact several different buyers. So I'm not asking that you have to sell my watch with the best price, right? Maybe there are 10 potential buyers here, and this lady is going to offer the best price, but she missed this lady, right, the moment, right? She missed it. But at least you ask the 3 or 4 potential buyers, then you will be fine. It means I cannot sue you for not complying with due diligence or the due care and skills, right? Because the law never requires an agent to do excellent work, but to have a reasonable level of competence, right? But reasonable effort. So if you are looking for buyers, at least you contact several buyers, but not one buyer, right? You don't have to sell at the best price. No, that's not a requirement. Because that is a requirement for excellent performance, right? So normally that's not a requirement at all. We know it's excellent, right? So if you can sell at the highest price because you are lucky, right? Sometimes just because you are lucky. But at least you have to contact several buyers, right? So what will the consequence for breach of agency duty? So you my agent breach the duties, then what happens? Many different remedies here. The right to dismiss the agent without notice, right? So I can dismiss the agent immediately. I can refuse to pay the commission. I can cancel the contract concluded by the agents and to recover all the secret profit, right? There's a lot of remedies here. Remedies here means the so what you get from the court by suing someone, right? In addition, right, that it's possible that an agent if that agent accepts commissions or advantage or any secret profit, and that person may commit criminal offense under Section 9 of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. This is what being committed by Chen Xiwen, right? The general manager of duty. So I'm not teaching criminal law here. Right? I'm not an expert in criminal law. So sometimes I handle commercial crime. Right? Sometimes I handle commercial crime, but most of the time I handle corporate matters. I served my privilege in Tinghong campus. You know that as a barrister, you have to learn 50% of civil practice and other 50% of criminal practice. Right? So I learned my criminal practice from Tinghong campus. Right? You know his, not from him, but his chamber, right? His chamber. You know that he's very famous in Hong Kong, right? And famous being what? Expensive. Right. Okay, so how to terminate agency? The last thing, right, before we end the class. A few more pages. Right? and you can go. So terminations. So how to terminate agency? So firstly, by the request of the parties. Second one, by the operation of law. What I mean by request of the parties, it means what being agreed by the parties, actually, right? What being agreed by the parties. Because you think about the true nature of agency. So actually it's a contract. Do you remember? 2 contracts and 3 parties, right? The first contract and the primary contract is the contract to appoint agent, right? To appoint agent. So when you're going to learn about it later in contract law. When you conclude a contract with the others, that contract, so basically you can agree on anything you like, provided that it is not illegal, right? So the first way to terminate agency is by your own stipulation, right? What being agreed between the principal and the agent regarding the termination, right? Number one. Second one, by the operation of law. It means sometimes the law stated a condition. When this thing happens, then agency relationship must terminate, right? So we take a look at the first one. Request of the party. It means by the own decisions of the principal and the agent regarding their contract. Number one, if the agent being retained for a particular transaction or specific subject matter, then the relationship terminates when the transaction being completed, right? I retained this lady to sell this watch on behalf of me, right? And then you conclude a contract with this gentleman. It completed. I don't have to terminate you because our relationship automatically terminated because I only asked you to sell this watch only, right? Just this one, right? So when that's done, terminated, right? Terminated. So sometimes it depends on the subject matter or the kind of transaction. If an agent being retained for a fixed period of time, then that will expire. After that period of time, upon my agent to sell my watch on behalf of me within this month, right? So the agency relationship automatically terminate on November. Sometimes we don't have any provision regarding termination, right? That's possible. That's not good drafting, right? When you have a poor solicitor, right? There's a poor drafting without the date of termination, right? So sometimes it happens. So if the agents, if the agency agreement has no termination provisions, right? So normally either party may give a notice to the other to terminate the agency relationship. It means that can be, the termination can be initiated by the principal or the agent, right? Because it must be mutual. Remember that, right? I authorize you to do something on behalf of me. That must be, mutually agreed. I must have your consent, right? To appoint you to be my agents. So if you are not willing to do it, if I'm not willing to authorize you, or you are not willing to be my agent, either party can terminate the agency relationship, right? Common sense stuff. But sometimes you have to be careful, right? When agency relationship, sometimes being complicated by other legal issues, for example, employment, right? Then you have to be very careful. Because agent, as an agent, and as an employee in law, they are different, right? They are different. It means that if you are my agent, it doesn't mean that you are my employee, right? And you are my employee, it doesn't mean that you are my agent. But sometimes you are having dual capacity. You are my agent already, right? You are my agent already. For example, you are my secretary, right? So I hired you as my secretary, as my personal assistant. So I'm paying you monthly salary. But also at the same time, I also appoint you to help me sell the watch as my agent, right? So you are now having dual capacity. So in that kind of situation, you have to be careful. Because when you want to terminate the agency relationship, that may trigger, some of the requirements in the employment ordinance. And that will be very troublesome, right? So I'm not teaching employment law. I don't have time to teach employment law here, but I just remind you to think of it, right? But if someone having a dual capacity, then you have to be careful, right? If you want to remove someone as an agent or as an employee that may trigger another area of law. Right? So we call a conflict of law. Right? That's another very big topic. Right? Another very big topic. It means two areas of law, they interact, right? They trigger each other, right? We call it conflict of law. So I don't have time to talk about it, but this I want you to, to think about it, right? Think about it. Then what I mean by operation of law? So how to terminate a contract by the operation of law? So number one, death of an agent or principal, of course, right? Common sense. If someone, pass away, that relationship terminated, of course. Insanity, of course, right? Someone, getting insane. So you are not having the mental capacity to do the work. Bankruptcy, right? That's another one. But if someone is bankrupt, right? What I mean by bankrupt? If you're bankrupt, it means that you are not, from a moral perspective, right? From a moral perspective. When you're bankrupt, it means that you are not capable to do what you promised. Is it right? Right? So why you get bankrupt? You're being sued by the bank to get bankrupt because you cannot settle your payment. Right? You borrow money from the bank, but you are not capable to pay. So you are not capable to do what you promised. And in that kind of situations, you cannot be an agent. Because you are not someone who can trust. Right? But I think that's correct, right? Because you are not doing what you promised. And that's the reason you get bankrupt. Right? So how can you become an agent? You cannot offer another promise again, right? Frustration of the agency. Well, that's another concept. Well, one thing you're going to learn in contract law. So sometimes something, something happened, and that the purpose of our agency contract is not possible to carry out, or not possible to operate at all. Right? For example, I retained you as my agent to buy some drugs for me, right? Some drugs, right? Medicine, right? Drugs on behalf of me. So I signed a contract, right? So you are trying to do your work, but the government imposed a new legislation in saying that the drugs I'm looking for, right? For example, drugs in treating cancer, right? The government imposed a new regulation, or the legislative council, they passed a new law in saying that this kind of drugs must be prohibited, right? It cannot be, buy and sell in Hong Kong. So our agency relationship being frustrated, not terminated, but frustrated means this is not operable, right? Frustrations. The last thing before we end the class here. So normally, right? Normally, the termination and the agency authority immediately. For example, you are my agent, right? So now I terminate the relationship, right? I send you a notice, I send you an email, I send you a WhatsApp, right? Anything. I just notify my agent, so you are terminated. Right? You are fired. You are fired. Or you terminate, you notify the principal that you are no longer acting on behalf of me. Right? So strictly speaking, it takes effect immediately. In theory, it takes effect immediately. Right? So I terminate you as my agent, then you will be terminated. Right at this moment, in this second, right? You'll be terminated. But you have to be careful in real life. Because the agent may still appear to the third party, the authority, and that may still buy the principal. So I hope that you can still recall something we call as a parent authority, right? Something we learned 30 minutes before. A parent authority. What I mean by parent authority? When something happens, right, and that being observed by the third party, because it always happens like this, then I can assume that you have the right to do something. For example, she's my secretary, right? She always act on behalf of me to negotiate with the bank regarding the interest rate of my fixed deposit, right? And she has been doing it for the last 15 years, right? Because you are my agent, yes, right? Fine, everything fine. But for whatever reason, right? Something, not really happy happened, and I terminated your agency, right? I terminated your agency relationship with me. So of course, in theory, it takes effect immediately, right? Because, okay, you are terminated. I no longer authorize you to do anything on behalf of me. But remember, apparent authority. Apparent authority depends on the observation of the third party, not depends on my instruction, right? Because you are doing it for a very long time. You are doing it for the last 15 years. So even I terminated your authorizations, the third party, right, another party, they know nothing about it. And because of the apparent authority, because of the concept of apparent authority, so anything concluded between this lady on behalf of me may still bound to me, even I already terminated your agency, right? And that's what we call the apparent authority. So you have to be careful, right? You have to be careful. So how to avoid this kind of problem? How to avoid this kind of problem? Notify, yes, very good, right? Very good. If you pay attention to the commercial world, and especially for the professional, for the very big law firm, the CPA firm, right, or the architects, if one of their partners retired, or reside, right, sometimes reside, sometimes retired, if that partner is very famous, right, that partner has been stated in that partnership for 20, 13 years, right, he got a lot of connections, got a lot of business. So when that person decided or retired, that partnership, they post an advertisement in a newspaper, and they post a notification in their own website, and they serve a notice. Usually, because you know that for the professional, they have their professional journal, right? That's for the lawyer, that's a Hong Kong lawyer, right? So you can search in Google. You can search Hong Kong lawyer. That's free, right? You can download. You can download. But come on, that's long. That's very boring, right? If you cannot sleep, right? They submit, or you can try, right? It helps you, right? You can download Hong Kong lawyer. You can just search by using Google, right? Hong Kong lawyer, right? That's a free copy. You can take a look. For all the professional bodies, usually they have a journal. So they post notifications in their professional journals. They post notifications in their website. They post a notification, or maybe in the newspaper, right? In order to alert everyone that this person is no longer my agent because he decided, right? And that's the way to avoid the problem related to apparent authority, right? Remember, apparent authority derived from the observation of the third party to what happened here, not depends on the authorization from the principal, right? Remember that, all right? Okay, that's all for today. See you next week, all right? See you next Tuesday, right? Next Tuesday. Right, so anything you want to ask me, you can talk to me, all right? You don't have any problem, you can leave, right? See you next week. You can, of course, you can speak to me in Cantonese if you're local.